Hello everyone, and welcome to this new video. Today, I want to talk about Christmas for a bit. Because every year we gather around fabulous Christmas trees like this one, and we open our presents, and we get a very unoriginal present sometimes. But, I've always been wondering, how do you make all those presents? How does Santa do that? Well, this year I can bring you the answer, and it actually involves a surprising amount of technical Minecraft. So, let's roll a tape. I think I... Don't worry, I'm not turning this into another charity video. This time asking to support my channel as my poor chunk loading videos didn't get the recognition Gremlins did, despite there being a lot of overlap. Or at least, that's how I remembered it. Watching things again, it turned out there was really more conflict than overlap. But basically, this just happens to be the last chunk, which is picked in order, and because it only picks 100 chunks per tick, and this is the 101st chunk, it will not pick this one in the first tick. As a result, basically this chunk will be loaded using the normal loader, but it doesn't matter because it's still loaded. It didn't get unloaded during that tick. However, the next tick, it will get unloaded, and the repeater won't do anything anymore because it triggered the tick before.
And this by loading even more chunks. The matter of the fact is that the game will only attempt to unload 100 chunks at a time, meaning that if we have more than 100 chunks loaded by the hoppers, and if the chunk with our mob trap is not in the first part of this list, it will stay loaded in hope of being unloaded next time. But the same hoppers in this hopper chain will load all the missing 100 chunks within the network on the next tick, which would prevent our trap of getting unloaded at all.
As far as I'm aware, this can be attributed to version differences. However, the fact that this kind of stuff went unnoticed by people who watch all videos, which led to some interesting discussions on last year's Christmas video by the way, goes to show that, somewhat unexpectedly, my one-take, unscripted, live commentary explanation videos are quite incomprehensible. Even so, due to lack of time, even this video will contain some parts like that. Anyway, it turns out publishing part of your research in a confusing way and the other part not at all for about 2 years is a great way to create weird situations. Although I don't have time to edit a lengthy video, so just pause here if you want to know more about that. Nevertheless, the strangest thing of all is so silly that I will cover it, albeit at the end of this video. On another note, remember how I said last year that I would possibly make an explanation video for the Crash Bait channel item duplication teaser next year? Well, it's still 2017 here technically, so let's give it a go. I've complained a bit about particular videos of Gnembon and them covering similar content as some of mine. However, let it be said that they're still mostly about his applications, and his theory seems to go further than mine. And regardless of all that, it seems that all of his research is original, or else I would have at least expected some reference to me somewhere. In fact, the great thing is, since he explained the theory so well, that means I don't have to make a well-presented video doing all that. Therefore, if my explanation here doesn't make sense, please make sure you've watched his videos first, which will be linked in the description, especially the second one. That being said, since I'm working in 1.8, there's one key difference to remember. All chunks put in the hash set to be unloaded won't be removed until they're actually unloaded, even if they're forcefully loaded again during the wait. So, without further ado, let's show the machine. So, here we are again, at the same spot as last year. However, this time I'm going to show you what's behind these walls. So when you press the button, a signal goes over here, it goes under there, activates the rail to send the minecart off, and then the minecart goes along this rail, the signal goes along this line, and then the minecart is stored over here in this holding cell, and I will get back to that later. Then the signal goes over here, over this bridge, all the way over here to an AAD. This I will cover, I've covered in another video and I will link it down in the description. So it also activates a latch right here, which keeps the AD on until it gives off its first signal at the next autosave, and then gets turned off, so we only get one signal from it. Then the signal from AD goes into this long delay over here, and to time exactly when the next autosave is going to happen. And then some stuff is going to happen, but first I want to show this signal right here, which goes into this third layer, as I like to call it, which loads all these chunks. Yeah, indeed. So as you can tell, there's each repeater line loads two rows of chunks because it's around the edge, right at the chunk border. These little squares here mark the chunks, and this large square right here, by the way, marks the spawn chunks. It's quite useful to just have all these chunks be permanently loaded. However, I think you could do the same thing just using player-loaded chunks. It's just that I didn't want to go through the hassle. So I just used spawn chunks, and that way I could use load random distance, and everything worked out alright. Okay, so the signal goes over here and loads all these chunks for quite a while. In fact, we have to load over 100 chunks here because that is the weird behavior we're going to be using. We want there to be some chunks next to the spawn chunks, or at least next to the permanently loaded chunks which we're using, which happen to be the spawn chunks, that are not saved in the first tick. Okay. Then at the end of this delay right here, so right before the next autosave, we have some signals over here which trigger this rail to send the minecart off, and then also this piston contraption over here, which I will discuss in a moment. Now, at the same time, the signal also goes up here and activates these two layers with a one-tick desync, one game tick that is, so that both during the autosave itself and then one tick after the autosave, when some chunks are still being unloaded, all these chunks are forcefully loaded again. I showed this setup, I think, in the Stables chunk loading part 1 video, which will also be linked down in the description in case you're curious about this. The instant repeaters, though, often get broken when you do this weird stuff where you activate them while they're being unloaded. So that's why I also have this setup right here, where we forcefully extend and retract these pistons for a while. But that happens afterwards, because after the delay, there's a bit more delay, and then we just load all these chunks again, and we fix all the repeaters. Alright, now why do we do all of that? Well, because exactly at the time that the autosave happens, the minecart will be right here, right before the chunk border. However, this chunk right here will be in the first first 100 chunks which are unloaded and therefore saved. So these will be stored in a save file, whereas this one actually is not in the first 100 chunks, so it will not be unloaded yet, and also won't be saved yet. And because we use these loaders here on the first two layers, all these chunks will be reloaded again during the same tick, so that the minecart continues being processed and will actually process its movement, so that in the next tick, it will be just over the chunk border in this chunk. However, since this chunk is not in the first 100 chunks to be saved, it will be saved now. And therefore, we now have two chunks which are saved into the save file with the same minecart in them. And that's how the duplication glitch works, pretty much. Now, the only thing we have left to do is to quit the game in such a way that it does not actually save the world again, because there is no second minecart in RAM. It's just that we mess with the save file. So to make sure that it does not save RAM to your file system again, we crash the game forcefully using F3C, which is a built-in feature. Again, as I explained last year, it's a crash-based duplication glitch. Unfortunately, you need some way to forcefully quit the game so that it does not save everything again, and that's the only way I could think of. Now, if you understood how that works, then you can also probably understand that we can do this with most other things, like blocks, for example. I tested this last year. With this timing, it precisely works out so that if you have this contraption, you send a pulse into it, it will pull and push a block like that. However, the nice thing is that this is timed in such a way that at the autosave, this block will still be here, but one tick later, this piston will start retracting, and as a result, there will be a block 36 here, if I'm not mistaken, which will contain the block data of this one, and as a result, whenever you do this, it will pretty much, you'll end up with this duration afterwards, and then this one afterwards, because so the block will be here, but it will also be pulled, so you'll have block duplication happening there. Similarly, I think you should also be able to get the same thing working for, let's say, entities inside of minecarts, of course, but also entities, perhaps, which can't be put inside of minecarts. I don't know, another dragon or something. However, the difficulty there is that you have to come up with some way to reliably move them at a very in a very reliable way, so you know exactly when they close the chunk boundary. And with that, I had some problems last year, so I am not going to show that. Getting the details right there was not easy. In fact, it wasn't easy for these things either, but I was quite happy when I got these working finally, even though I'm fairly sure I got them working in the summer. For some reason, when I looked at it around Christmas, I had to repair everything again. So yeah, I think that explains the main principles. So I hope that is clear. If not, please ask questions in the comments. Now here comes a silly story. Last year, I spent a lot of time fixing the machine in version 1.8. Once that was finished, I tested in 1.9, noticed that it didn't work, and just abandoned the idea of fixing it there due to time constraints. However, in March 2017, Gnambon released his permaloader, and during the afternoon I spent researching that and his claims. I realized that the chunk loading code hadn't just changed in between 1.8 and 1.9, which I already took into account, but that it had changed in a fundamental manner. You see, after 1.8 they did some restructuring, changing the order of some ifs and fors, which I was already aware of, but here's the key line I didn't pick up on until after I saw Gnambon's work. They added an extra condition in order for actual chunk loading to take place. This field inside the chunk object effectively says or whether or not it is still marked to be unloaded, as it is set true to true when it is initially added to the drop chunks set, but it is set to false again if Minecraft calls a specific method to load that chunk again in the meanwhile. As a result, you can now have chunks removed from the drop chunk set without the proper unloading actions taking place. This also explains why my duplicator didn't work anymore. Instead of being unloaded and saved one tick after the other save, it wasn't being unloaded at all. That means that I'm the first person to publish proof of owning a permaloader. As in, I published the hash 1 year ago when you guys can finally verify it now, yay. The problem is, I just thought it was a broken item duplicator until after Gnambon released his permaloader, so I don't know if that counts. On top of that, I suppose Gnambon already released a permaloader with his mob switch video, without actually calling it one. Presumably since, just like mine, it's a way less versatile and flexible one than the one he ended up publishing in March. That also means it's even easier to duplicate objects with this new unloading code. Just put your object in the chunk that will be permaloaded, wait for an autosave, and let it unload and save all chunks. Then you have plenty of time to move the object into any non-permaloaded chunk, wait for another autosave, and you're done. Just make sure the chunk the object was initially in is now permaloaded, so that it isn't saved, and you should again have a save file with duplicated objects using chunk unloading desynchronization. So yeah, that's the funny story I got from this 2-year debacle. I made an item duplicator in 1.8, which 1.9 converted into a permaloader, and I can prove I already had this world on December 31st, 2016. However, it wasn't until someone properly released a permaloader in March 2017 that I realized I had accidentally made one as well. I think that wraps things up. After half a year without technical Minecraft videos, I hope this suffices for a while, since I should really continue studying now. Thanks for watching, enjoy 2018, and I hope I will see you in another video. Yes, there will be at least one other video in 2018. Probably.